afternoon and welcome to the 10th edition of the Sustainable After Interview series. My name is Jelena Tašić Pizzolato. I'm the Innovation and Deal Flow Director at Loomish, a Swiss investment management company. As many of you know, we have been bringing these weekly conversations with our Fashion Innovation Award finalists and jury members each week to our YouTube channels. And basically, we're discussing the ways in which this COVID-19 crisis could actually serve as a catalyst for change in fashion. 2020 was supposed to be the year of fashion sustainability, but now we are facing a much bigger pandemic. With our entrepreneurs, brands, investors, and opinion leaders, we're discussing actually how this could actually be a way forward for the fashion sustainability. So without further ado, I'm very happy to present our guests for today. So we have Amanda Curtis. She's the co-founder and CEO of N.A.bld. She was also Forbes 30 Under 30 and many other things. So we're very happy to have you with us, Amanda.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And also on the other side, joining us from Paris is another fellow American, Carina Hopper. She's a sustainability lecturer, speaker, and facilitator based in Paris. Welcome, Carina. It's really a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Jelena.
So you both have had a very interesting career that brought you to where you are now from very different directions somehow, but everything around sustainability. So could you please share a little bit more, maybe starting from Carina, about your professional background and what brought you where you are at the moment?
Yes, of course. So hello, everyone. I'm Carina Hopper. Thank you, first of all, to Loomish. I look forward to joining the conference and the Fashion Innovation Award ceremony when it resumes and we can safely be back to business. So in addition to my side projects, which I'm going to talk about, I think, a little bit later, I teach business sustainability at the MBA and master's level in 4 business schools in Paris, including ESSEC Business School and ESMOD Fashion Business School, where I focus on sustainability in the fashion and hospitality industries and kind of where those 2 industries converge as well in terms of the luxury sector. I'd say that my career has 2 traits that are maybe typical of millennials, and that's a big shift in career direction and a strong disillusionment with the traditional business world. And there's probably a correlation there for many people. There certainly is one there for me. I grew up not really knowing what I wanted to do when I was older, but having this vague idea that I wanted to work in management. I wanted to be a businesswoman. And I really put big business and large corporations on a pedestal for a long time. After leaving the United States when I was 17 and studying translation actually in Barcelona, I worked in the language service industry in Spain for many years in business development and account management, where my company served some of the biggest clients in fashion, particularly Spanish fast fashion and hospitality. And that's where I started to get this sense that I didn't really want to spend my life contributing indirectly to the concentration of wealth in the hands of these large corporations that were our clients. But I wasn't done with business completely, and I think that's because I've always thought that if you want to change society, don't become a politician, become a business leader. So I moved to Paris to do my MBA and searched for a way to kind of reconcile doing business and doing good, which naturally brought me to business sustainability and also really quite organically to the startup world, which I'll talk a little bit more about later.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Carina. So speaking about putting together business and doing good, so Amanda, you have had a similar motivation, let's put it that way.
Yes, absolutely. In my case, I think that necessity bred invention. So my background, I grew up in the fashion industry. I experienced firsthand just the entire kind of ecosystem. My aunt was vice president of a large bridal company that she took global, so I got to see everything from the manufacturing floor to the retail floor, and then just taking a brand global, what that entailed. So I always knew that I was going to be in this space. I ended up going after my undergrad, I went to Parsons and studied fashion design, thinking that was kind of the route for me. And directly out of Parsons, I started working for a variety of different brands, from those just starting out with their first collections, to medium-sized brands, to much larger brands. And what I saw working in the industry, no matter what size the brand that I worked for was just a lot of things that did not agree with my kind of personal and moral values. A lot around just how things were made, where things were made, the conditions and how those things were made, and just the business ethics that I saw as well. A lot of like knockoffs and reproductions. And from a business standpoint, when I actually took a step back from just the design world and looked at the numbers, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I decided to get involved in the tech startup space, because what these tech startups were doing was taking the same amount of money that a brand was traditionally putting into a New York Fashion Week show, and creating billion-dollar companies that had much larger impact. And I couldn't understand why, that same business model wasn't being implemented in the fashion space. I thought that there's a lot of potential for fashion to be better, from both a business perspective and a sustainability perspective and a moral perspective. But what I discovered was that there needed to be just an entire kind of sea change in fashion and a different approach. And no one was really creating that approach. Everyone was, I think, was probably too afraid to. And luckily enough, I was young and naive, and I thought, I'm going to at least try. I have nothing to lose. So decided to create a platform where brands could operate as lean as a startup and use some of those same type of lean methodologies to launch product without that upfront investment in inventory, which I believe is like the crux of sustainability. So we created N.A.bld, my partner Gemma Soul and I, and created a way for brands to do things better, more sustainably, and with less upfront capital, so that it made sense both from a business perspective, but also from an environmental perspective as well. So yes, kind of blending these two worlds, I think, has created real innovation that was necessary for brands, and is necessary now more than ever.
Absolutely. Carina, you work with a lot of, I believe, executives also that are, or future executives definitely, that are in the fashion world, but in general in the business world as well. So could you tell us a little bit about how you approach this sustainability issue from the academic perspective? So what do you tell them in your courses?
Yes, well, aside from my teaching, I also work closely with business school program leaders, both fashion business schools and traditional business schools, to ensure that sustainability is brought into the debate and into the classroom. Ideally, this would be happening across all of your traditional business courses, so finance and accounting, supply chain, logistics, marketing, all your core courses. Unfortunately, the landscape of sustainability teaching in higher education right now is one that means that the best case scenarios that we're seeing are actually in elective courses, isolated courses, isolated programs entirely sometimes. And this is not ideal, because the challenge of sustainability, as you know, really requires more of a systems thinking approach, where we're taking a step back and taking a broader view of how all the parts of the system interrelate and affect each other. But in any case, that's where we are now due to several factors, but we're working on changing that, and I'll get to that a bit later with another project of mine. But one thing I'm doing, for example, at ESSEC Business School, is that we've just introduced for this year a sustainability specialization in their master's in hospitality management, with my colleague and business partner, Joanna Wagner. And of course, hospitality, with food waste, water and energy use, also the traditional issues behind sustainability and luxury, which is often associated with the idea of abundance and excess. So that's a strong area for improvement, but also fashion, which is why we're here today. So to try to get the next managers of the big fashion brands luxury and fast fashion as well, and premium brands to be more conscious business leaders.
It's a very important point. I mean, we often read actually how sustainability shouldn't be just a department. So in the business discourse, there is already this topic that it shouldn't be sitting just within one department. Whereas, as you are rightly pointing out, if you look at education, it still is in a way. Just, I mean, it is separated from the rest. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your project later.
Thank you.
Amanda, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about N.A.bld. So it is, as you mentioned, it is a platform. It enables brands to do things in a quicker, in a more sustainable way. So could you tell us how it works? What does it do?
Sure. So at N.A.bld, we believe that sustainability should be core to the business model. It's not just an initiative, which I think so many brands have started in that way, and it really needs to be ingrained in the supply chain side of things. So we're a platform that gives brands basically a plug-and-play sustainable supply chain. So the way that it works is we allow brands to digitize their products on our system. So it's a little bit of a PLM that we've custom built. And then connect to a network of vetted manufacturers. Right now, they're all based in the US, but we are planning on a European expansion and are in the works of that. So basically, it gives brands a way to connect with no minimum, quick turn production partners who meet a set of criteria on our end. We have a very strict code of ethics that we follow, and we do a lot of work to onboard these manufacturers and understand what their capabilities are. We've also created technology for these manufacturers so that they can improve their own systems and their own timelines and just overall their operations. And because of that, these manufacturers actually agree to terms that they typically do not agree to in the fashion space. So they're agreeing to no minimums, or in some cases very low as 10 items, and quick turnarounds, so about 2 to 6 weeks depending on the product. And traditionally in the fashion space, this is absolutely unheard of. You'd have minimums in the thousands, tens of thousands, if not higher, and then you'd have to schedule out manufacturing 3 to 6 months in advance at least. And I think just as a world, we don't have that opportunity anymore. So brands can get real-time bids from manufacturers. And once they choose a manufacturer to work with, they actually see all of the production updates happening on our platform in real time. So it's all about that constant communication in one place and taking everything off of emails, phone calls, texts, faxes in some cases, and Excel and putting it into one system. But I think the real kind of innovation that happens with our system and brands who use it to do things quickly and to do things without inventory is it allows for this inventory-free type retailing where a retailer or brand can use our platform to sell directly to consumers and then produce after that sale is made. And when they do that, our system allows for that consumer to take part in that process and get some of those updates that the brand is also getting direct from the manufacturer. So they're seeing where their product is in real time, how it's being made, who's making it, where it's being made, so that there's total transparency, which is really something that the consumer is looking for now more than ever. And it allows for the brand to also operate in this very lean model, which from both the environmental perspective, but also from a business perspective, makes the most sense. And at the end of this entire process, which only takes a few weeks, the brand then gets all the data back on how that production run went. They have the consumer data that they can tie into, and they can be better informed the next time they want to launch a new product, or they can re-release that product and do things in a better manner. So it's all about kind of informing the process and using the system in a way that is manageable and sustainable and a lot more business savvy.
That's very interesting. So you're effectively not only supporting brands in operations and production, but you're also helping them enrich the customer experience in a way.
Correct. I mean, brands can use the platform in any way they want. We understand that brands operate in different capacities, but the brands that are most successful with our system are the ones that really use it to inform the customer along that journey, which I think is so, so important now more than ever. And I think it's important for the brands as well, not just the customers.
Amanda, I saw that you're also working in the education space in terms of training for designers. And I was going to ask you if you could explain a bit more about that as well.
Sure, absolutely. So we have launched kind of an online digital course now that everything has been taken online to better inform designers and brands about what we're doing. I think it was necessary for us to take this step. We do a lot of in-person kind of teaching. We go to a lot of the design schools and, you know, sit in on classes and that's great, but we need to reach a much larger audience now, even larger brands. So we launched this course where brands can learn how to kind of rethink the model of how to get things made, because it does require a little bit of unlearning, I'd say. What we do is not the traditional approach. It's not about placing inventory. It's not about setting up supply chains in a traditional manner. So we really found it necessary to create this course, which, you know, can take about a week to go through, depending on the brand's own speed, to really teach some of these new concepts and new methodologies for going forward with a more sustainable supply chain.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit more about the brands that you work with. Like, who would be like your ideal or typical brand?
Sure. So we've definitely seen a change on that end. We started off working with smaller brands because they were new. They were setting up new supply chains. It was easy for us to come in and say, here's the one-stop plug-and-play solution that you can get going in a matter of 24 hours. What we're seeing now are much larger brands coming to us who have an interest in rethinking their supply chain. We've worked with brands as small as just those starting up with one person, all the way through to Disney, Macy's. We've worked with NBC's Project Runway. So we're really seeing like a wide range and variety, and now we're seeing a lot more global brands coming to us interested and just starting to incorporate this new type of supply chain in their business.
That's really exciting. So Amanda mentioned how the consumer slightly, I mean, we already see that the consumer is changing and the brands are changing as well. So Carina, I'd like to kind of take a moment to discuss the present moment. So the pandemic has certainly shifted or accelerated some trends that were underlying already. So how do you perceive the present situation from where you stand in the industry, and what do you foresee as the main changes that would be here to stay, actually?
Yes, so certainly this is a topic that a lot of people are discussing right now and trying to make assumptions about, and certainly this crisis is affecting every area of fashion. Obviously, speaking on the larger topic of sustainability, we don't really know which way the industry could go, but there's definitely no question that we're already seeing definitely a strong and more urgent move into digital solutions like the one that Amanda proposes with N.A.bld. And I think just touching on some of the things that she said, I think we're definitely seeing traditional brands becoming kind of more dependent on startups to provide them with these tech solutions that they need so immediately right now. So what I've found interesting in general in this time has been kind of this proof, not only of the deep vulnerability that we have as a human species, which I think is a good lesson for all of us, but also the feasibility of change in our society, and that the idea that business as usual is not inevitable.
That's a very powerful quote. We had one of the in one of the interviews, there was a person who said that what is eventually going to change fashion for sustainability, it cannot be a new inventor. It needs to be an innovator. It needs to be a startup. So it's definitely along the lines of what you're saying. Amanda, in the same way, so touching upon this, the current situation we are all living, so you have found actually a wonderful way, an alternative model for a more sustainable, for a more transparent and efficient approach to fashion production. And you have received a lot of media attention as well. So you've been featured in Forbes, in Wall Street Journal, and so on. So what do you think, where does this interest come from? And so what is the key selling point that actually people recognize when they look at N.A.bld? And slightly maybe in connection with that, how have your business plans for this year been changed?
Sure. So, I think sustainability in fashion is very much a trending topic, or was prior to COVID, where everyone is trying to understand how do you change an entire system that's so ingrained and is very, very archaic. It really hasn't changed in over 100+ years. So we do get a lot of media attention for what we do. And I think that some of our larger kind of customers and brand partnerships that we've done have helped bring light to this new approach and business model. So for example, with Project Runway, that is a very large show with viewership about 3 million people per episode. And what we did there is we actually created an inventory-free retail experience where the customer could purchase pieces that they saw on the show and actually have them made on demand in the USA in a few weeks. What's, I think, really driving some of that attention, especially from like the business side, is yes, the sustainability part is very important. Like we're saving, on material costs and resources, and making the product local to the end consumer cuts down on environmental impact and carbon emissions. But what's also super important is just what kind of business impact that we're able to have. So by doing this inventory-free model, we actually were able to save NBC Universal millions of dollars. They otherwise would have invested in inventory blindly, either missing the mark one way or the other. And I think that is definitely what has garnished us a lot of attention. It's like, how is this a better model going forward? Because so many retailers and brands are struggling with the concept of just how to reduce inventory or get it right. What's changed now is, I think, that conversation that we were having pre-COVID has accelerated exponentially. There's so many brands facing such hardship right now, and so many brands rethinking their entire supply chain and having to do so. So what we're seeing is just an influx of much larger brands and established retailers coming to us saying, okay, how can we set this up? How can we start? How can we really figure this process out? Because going forward, the system that we were operating in 5 months ago isn't going to work. But from both, a business perspective, an environmental perspective, but also the consumer is now demanding different things of me. And I don't know how those things scale. I think what's important with technology is the ability to scale and to give a solution that is manageable. So we're really seeing just greater demand now that we probably forecasted seeing in 2 to 3 years. We're seeing, every single week, which I think is really encouraging overall, because this is truly where fashion needed to be 5-10 years ago.
Absolutely. That is very encouraging to hear, and congratulations so far. Could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about the setup of your team? Who are the people on your team? How techy is it?
Sure. So we are a small startup. We have some kind of manufacturing design, technical designers on board who help us oversee just the entire process and onboard our manufacturers, which is really key to what we bring for value. And then we have some amazing developers, obviously, who are building out this technology. But we really do rely on just an awesome network of trusted production partners and really getting to know them. So we view them kind of as part of our team. They're an extension. They're always giving us feedback. They're saying, you know, we're building a product for them as well. And that has been really just crucial in how we think about our business and what we bring to the table beyond just the technology. You have to have really great relationships. You have to have really great communication in place. Technology is only like the small part that makes it all happen, but there's so much more to the business and value that we bring beyond just like a great way to communicate. So I think that's probably something that is overlooked by the media, but as a startup and as a business overall, it is so, so crucial. I think anyone in the fashion space really, truly understands and values that piece that we bring.
Yeah, I must say, from looking at hundreds of applications for the Fashion Innovation Award, what really struck me actually was the insight into the fashion business. That enabled really manage to understand and to detect a pain point that was there and that was impossible somehow to be resolved by a brand or by a producer. So I think that you really managed to identify a sweet spot somehow.
Well, thank you. I think it honestly came just from experiencing it myself. I did have my own brand. I failed to manage that. To mention that in the beginning, just understanding the intricacies. And I think sometimes technology players come in with a solution without understanding the fashion industry. And it does not operate like any other industry, for better or for worse. There are so many intricacies. And if you don't truly understand how it operates, you can't truly innovate in a way that's meaningful. So I think that has really helped us to just, you know, coming from that space and then looking outward, and then my co-founder having this really great technology experience and kind of combining those worlds together to create something new and innovative.
Thank you for sharing this, Amanda. It's really a positive startup story from this crisis. So, Carina, you are also very active in the startup world. So you have worked with different startups across the globe, so both US, but also stationed up in Paris and Barcelona as well. So is there anything you could share with us about the effects that the pandemic has had on them? And also, how do you see your role in it? How are you trying to support them in this delicate period?
Yes, so from the beginning, when working on sustainability, I realized that we needed startups, we needed the innovation coming from startups. And I'm working now actually as part of kind of a support for these startups. I'm working on connecting business schools and startups through different initiatives. So I've just finished last week with 2 groups of students from the MBA at ESSEC Business School, kind of their end of MBA projects with 2 startups, which this is the first time that a more traditional business school, in this case, is accepting startups into these projects. Whereas before, they wanted the big names, and now that they also see the need to really put the students on the cutting edge of business, and so many changes are happening. And I would say the same thing that Amanda said, that what I'm seeing is that especially for these tech startups with these important sustainable solutions, there's actually a huge opportunity through all of this, and that they're actually growing faster than ever before in many cases. And so the 2 that I work with, which are sustainable fashion tech startups, one of them is The Fabricant, which I believe Jelena, you've collaborated with as well, which is developing digital only fashion already with brands like Puma and Tommy Hilfiger. And that this rethinking of what fashion means and what it will mean in the future. And also a startup called Bizarre, which is working to kind of bridge the gap between hospitality and fashion by offering sustainability solutions for fashion brands within hotels. For example, they're looking now into how to best develop a fashion rental in hotels, for example. And they also have a huge digital showroom opportunity for brands. So both of these are examples of companies that are growing through the crisis. And I think that we would see that kind of across the board in terms of the companies that are offering, the real solutions.
Yeah, it is somehow the message that we are receiving from different parts of the ecosystem. I'd say that the brands are looking for more agile solutions. Their brands have probably never been this open, at least what I'm experiencing from my side, and also a lot of growth in the tech space for startups as well. Going back to what we were saying earlier, Amanda. So I found it very interesting reading your LinkedIn introduction on your profile, and I learned that you created N.A.bld, so this design to delivery software for on-demand manufacturing, somewhat out of frustration. So the fashion industry, as you were mentioning before, it's been a century that it hasn't changed effectively when it comes to the operations or to the business model, and there is also a very strong cultural change that needs to happen within the industry and within the brands. So when you sit with brands, when you sit with designers, for instance, also in the course that you are doing, so how do you sell to them? So how do you explain what you're able to do? How do you make them envision a new version of themselves?
Yes, well, it depends on the brand that I'm talking to. I truly believe that now there's more opportunity than ever for smaller independent brands to have more meaningful impact and a part of the market. So for smaller brands, it's a fairly easy conversation for us to say, we have a way that you can put out products without spending tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that was my story. That was my frustration. I had my own brand. I had funding. I had success. I was going to London Fashion Week, and I still failed. The failure rate is incredibly high due to those high capital costs. So we're essentially lowering the bar in one of the hardest industries to break into. So for smaller brands, it's a little bit of a no-brainer because we're giving them, this access to manufacturers and to a supply chain that would take them months, if not years, to really kind of build up, and so much in just funding and resources. So that for us has always been kind of our bread and butter. When talking to larger brands who are coming to us who have been in operation, it is truly that kind of innovation approach that we take. And I think that conversation has gotten a lot easier over the past 5 months to have, as brands are kind of forced into rethinking, which it's not an easy process, especially if your system is so ingrained and it had been working for so long and now it no longer is. So we really do rely on some of our case studies with our larger brands to say, look, this isn't impossible. This is something that works on a larger scale. We can prove it. We've worked with major names, some of the largest brands in the world like Disney, and we have helped them save millions of dollars, and we have helped them get product to customer. And by the way, when they get the product to customer, it is actually a better experience for the customer and it results in less returns. So one of the things that I think is most interesting from kind of this pre-sale model that we've been able to power is that when you involve the customer in that journey of making their product on demand, the return rate of products we found is around 7%, which for online e-commerce clothing is incredibly low. And so for a brand to look at that, it just makes that conversation so much easier, because we have built that out and we do have that trust and we do have those data points that they can look at and say, wow, no, this actually could work for us. This is something that we're willing to test and try. And the customer at the end of the day is going to accept it. I think some of the pushback that we got from in the very beginning was a customer isn't going to wait for their product. They're so used to having something from Amazon given to them right away, that immediate gratification. And what we actually found was the exact opposite. Yes, the customer ordering paper towels and cleaning supplies wants it drone to them in a few hours, sure. But when you're buying a product like fashion, which carries such weight, it's much more meaningful and personal. And you are typically paying a little bit more for that than traditional commodities. You want to know that that product took time to make. If you're manufacturing something on demand in a matter of days, which we have done and we have tried and we've did that ethically in a sustainable way, we actually found that the return rate increased when you decrease the amount of time it takes to create. And that's because when you do things in the correct way and you just give insight to the customer, they see it as an experience. Like, it's an experience that they don't get anywhere else. That they understand it takes time and effort and craftsmanship to actually make products. And that's luxury. It's not the product at the end of the day. It's the experience tied to the product that's true luxury. And the customer truly values that. So I think that is important for us in just how we sell the platform. It's not just technology or supply chain. It's a customer experience as well, which I think is different in how we approach everything as compared to other solutions in the market. It's the full ecosystem that we're really addressing, not just how to make things.
Yeah, and it's again about really understanding the luxury customer, the fashion customer, and the business.
Or just anyone. I mean, everyone purchases this product online. Everyone wants an experience that is bespoke to them. It doesn't have to be a luxury price point. You can still provide this luxury special experience through technology. It's not costing you as a business anything more. It's scalable. It's just part of your system now. And I think the customer is demanding that now more than ever. That really opens a lot of possibilities. Really. Connecting in a way to this and to what we were saying earlier, so speaking of a cultural change in a way, Carina, so you have recently co-founded LaBelleEDuC. I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it well. Is that correct? So your idea, basically, if I understood correctly, is to support universities in integrating sustainability content in strategy and implementation. So could you tell us a little bit more about the idea behind it and what are your first projects?
Yes, thank you. So the idea behind it is that we think that higher education programs have this huge power and this huge responsibility to change what happens later on in the boardroom, to change the decision making throughout industries. And there's really hasn't been such a focus on the teaching content as there should be, which is why the biggest initiative of LaBelleEDuC is a sustainability label that we're creating in collaboration with AFNOR, which is the French representative member of ISO, in order to assess and measure also the impact of that sustainability teaching will have later on. It's a big challenge, and it's one that we are putting a lot of effort into, and we will be for the foreseeable months. But we are launching this year with our first programs, and we're really trying to get down to what is it that will make a difference. It's hard. It's a difficult thing. It hasn't been done yet because it's a difficult thing to measure. But that's the challenge we have ahead of us.
It's a good one. Do you have already? How does it work? Do you already have the universities that would be taking part?
Yes, we already have some pilot university programs, so it's going to be program-based, not university-based, and we have these huge universities with difficult decision-making structures. So we're focusing on what individual programs do that have program leaders that are invested in this topic, and there are many who want to move forward and just don't know quite how.
And if I could ask an additional question, so are you focusing on business in general, or are you addressing maybe tourism or fashion or the industries that you are closer to?
Yes, we're starting with business schools because it's our kind of the domain of my business partner, Joanna Wagner, and myself. But we're definitely moving into other higher education programs, including engineering, etc. But we're starting with business because we want to start with the future business leaders, but across industries, so including fashion, certainly.
It's very, very exciting and needed, I would say. So we look forward to receiving updates from you.
Thank you.
About this.
It's needed. I mean, if you can inform business people about the sustainability aspect, it would make my job a lot easier because I find myself
have to work from all different angles, certainly.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of teaching that is involved on our end to, potential customers, venture capitalists. I feel like sometimes we're a little bit on a soapbox, and it's like you should know these things coming into the conversation, and it's a little bit scary that not everyone is as informed as we'd like them to be. So I
Absolutely.
hope that this is meaningful, and
yes.
The leaders of tomorrow are better impacted and better informed by it. So thank you for starting it.
No, certainly. That's what we found as well, and we can't expect the heads of companies to take sustainability seriously if their very prestigious business schools haven't even taught it as a core subject or integrated it throughout their program.
Absolutely.
An important work indeed. As we are drawing our discussion to a close, so I have a couple more questions for both of you. So we saw like fashion sustainability was really big last year, at least in the media, at least on the paper. We see more and more fashion tech startups sprouting across the globe. So I was wondering from your experience so far, Amanda, what advice would you give to an aspiring B2B fashion tech startup, to an entrepreneur such as yourself maybe 3 years back?
Oh, goodness. I think that, so just looking at the fashion tech landscape, there's so much opportunity. I think that's what really drew me and convinced me, to take that leap, because it is a system that hasn't truly changed and is just really starting to change now. So anyone starting in it, I think that there's massive opportunity for multiple solutions, which to me as a creative person is so exciting because there's just a lot that can be done and a lot of improvement that can be done. So the opportunity to have meaningful impact, it gives me chills a little bit because there's so much work to do. Whereas in other industries, I feel there may not be as much, or it's a little bit more saturated of a market. With that said, I think that the challenge is also ingrained in that kind of same perspective. There's so much to be done. It's a little bit overwhelming. And from a brand's perspective, it's overwhelming as well. Where do they start? Where do they go? How do they change? How do they reinvent their business, especially when they're forced to? So that is the challenge. It's kind of, if you're going to be a fashion tech startup founder, you have to be willing to sell and to convince people and to have those data points behind you and to really kind of go against the tides and try something new and innovative and different, because I don't think that change is going to happen from just tweaking parts of the system I think that we really do need a total sea change. So it will take people who are real visionaries and who are willing to try new things and to find the brands that are willing to go along with them and to test out and to trial. So it's a little bit like, I like to say, it's the Wild West of the tech world in a lot of ways. And there's also challenges too on the funding side. It's an underfunded sector of technology in general. But I think that is changing as well. So I'm very optimistic now more than I was 3 years ago, for sure.
Thank you very much for sharing. Carina, from your perspective, so what would be your advice to a fashion tech founder that is just starting out?
Yes, so I think one of the things I tell my sustainable startup class is to not underestimate, the power that you have to compete, but also collaborate with the really big players. Don't feel intimidated. We need your solutions. They need your solutions. And also to just start. This is obviously kind of a cliche now, but to start with your why. If you start with the change you want to see, of course, and kind of work back from there. Because that's the only thing that's going to keep you going through the challenges of being an entrepreneur. I think Amanda would probably agree with that.
For sure.
Great. That's in a way draws us to a final question and comment, which is actually about where we go from here, effectively. So over the past few months, we have heard quite a few worrying voices that the pandemic might prove to be a huge setback on the sustainability. On the other hand, we have seen quite a few good examples of how actually it has accelerated the sustainability efforts. So Amanda, if I can ask you for a few closing words of how we can ensure that sustainability actually remains high on the agenda despite the crisis.
Absolutely. So I think that the current pandemic is really a chance for the industry to take a step back and reassess and have a restart. So the brands that I'm seeing that are most successful are the ones that are taking this opportunity to really step back, take a 1,000-foot view, understand what they can be doing better as an organization, look at their entire system as a whole, their entire supply chain as a whole, understand where there can be more efficiency, there can be more sustainability, and also look at where the customer is going at the same time. I think that's super, super important, obviously, for any business right now. But to understand what's important to the customer and what's going to be important to the customer, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years from now, it's going to be very, very different. And I think that sustainability and transparency, which I believe go hand in hand, are going to be core to the customer. So if you don't have that in your supply chain, in your business model, then that's time to rethink and readjust. And luckily, there are a lot of solutions that are already on the market right now. N.A.bld is just one of them. There are plenty of them out there that can help brands rethink and do things in a better way. So of course, I'm an eternal optimist as an entrepreneur, but I really do believe that this time can be a positive catalyst and a time where brands have the opportunity to take a pause and to readjust and to set themselves up for a scalable and successful future, because it's definitely going to look very, very different. But there are already indicators out there saying this is where it's headed on the consumer side, and here's how you can better yourself in your business and also the planet as well. Why not? At this point, there's no excuses. So I'm really, really optimistic. And if there are any brands out there, happy to continue the conversation as well and just see, because every brand is very different. We know that, but I think there are a lot of opportunities and technologies out there that can help them get to that point a lot faster in a matter of weeks or months, not years.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for sharing your thoughts and your experience in general. And it was, it gave, I must say, personally, it gave me more optimism about where the industry is heading. So you transmitted a bit of it to me. Carina, so the same question goes to you. So how do we ensure that sustainability actually remains high on the agenda?
Yes, I certainly agree with everything Amanda said. I think we've had kind of this global opportunity to reevaluate our ethics and what is truly important. I think that it's a good time, and I would hope that brands would be connecting more with their vulnerability as companies, and as they're connecting more with their humanity as well. And in terms of moving forward, I would hope we would also see, a lot more support for startups, because I think that that's one of the things that's going to make the difference, and also support for education, of course.
Absolutely. Thank you very much once again, both Carina and Amanda. It was a wonderful conversation. So thank you for your time and your insights. I'm sure that our audience found it stimulating. Myself, for sure, I'm getting out of this conversation more optimistic, as I said before, than I was before. So for all of you watching us, I'll be bringing discussions like this each week to our LinkedIn profile. So please do follow Loomish SA if you're interested in learning more about fashion sustainability. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.